Hello folks, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brent. In the next couple of videos, I want to get you all caught up to speed on where we are with the shop build. I want to talk about what we're up to in the next coming year, and I want to go over a few tips and tricks. There are a few things that I ended up using a lot in this build that I didn't cover in the previous layout videos, and I also want to go over a couple of questions from viewers. So at this point, the skeleton of the building is up. We put some roof boards on that are actually going to be the ceiling, so it's what you'll see when you're looking up on the second floor. Those are tongue and groove boards that I made myself. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Then we wrap the whole thing in plywood and then sort of cover the whole thing in house wrap, and that'll keep it mostly dry for the winter till we go back in the spring, open it all up again and carry on. So the last real video you saw in this project was me putting together the big gable end brackets to support extra large overhangs on the gable end. I made a whole bunch of brackets also for the eave line because the eave line brackets or the eave line overhangs are going to be extra large as well. That was all last winter, and we'll do the final assembly of all those little bits and pieces when it comes time to do the roof this spring. And last summer, for the most part, the timber framing was fairly standard. We applied all the rules and principles that we talked about in the layout video, but I do want to talk about those couple of things that we ended up using a fair amount that I didn't talk about in the video. I want to talk a little bit about what it's like to put the frame together on the ground, a few tips and tricks around there. But what I really want to do for this video is start at the bottom. I want to talk about the foundation that we chose to use for the shop. It's called a Rubble Trench foundation. Now, a lot of folks have heard of Rubble Trench, and they automatically think it's kind of a newfangled thing, but it isn't. It's something that Frank Lloyd Wright actually repopularized in the 1920s, but it was around before that. So the appeal of the Rubble Trench foundation for us was, one, it was a lot less dirt work and a lot less dirt management and the whole works, a lot less concrete work, a lot less concrete itself, but also a lot less form work, and it was really conducive to DIY, which is great because we did all of the work ourselves. So let's take a closer look. So this is what it looks like. This drawing came from the Endeavour Center's website. I'll include a link to it in the description below. It's called a Rubble Trench foundation because in its simplest form, it's a dug trench drained to daylight filled with non-compressible, porous, free-draining material such as coarse angular gravel or even stone, brick, concrete, rubble from building demolitions. This ensures water drains away from under the building and any loads that are borne by the compressed material are transferred down to the firm soil or bedrock in the bottom of the trench. A much more sophisticated or updated approach modified for cold climates looks like this. You start with a trench centered under where the perimeter of the building will be. In our case, the engineer called for the trench to be 24 inches wide, but since the excavator bucket was actually 24 inches or so, and it's not a precise instrument, it ended up being a little bit wider than needed, but that's just fine. So we're in a cold climate, so the bottom of our trenches needed to be 6 inches below local frost line, which in our case is 4 feet down. So we dug down a minimum of 4 feet 6 inches everywhere, and using a laser transit made sure everything was graded downhill to a common point well away from the building. The minimum grade is often cited as 1/8 of an inch per foot or 1/4 of an inch per foot, but just ask your engineer what they require. So here's where I want to stop and offer up a little tidbit of advice. This is the second Rubble Trench foundation that I've personally done. I've been involved with a number of them in other projects, other timber framing work, but this is the second one that we've done, and we learned something the first time that I'd rather you not have to learn the hard way. So a lot of you have seen videos on my channel from a few years ago with my self-loading trailer. Some people will call it a forestry trailer. It's basically a trailer that you pull behind your tractor and has a hydraulic arm for picking up logs. I've done all kinds of different things with that unit. It's been really helpful. I've used it for salvaging logs out of the woods because it has a winch on it. I'll put some links to the videos of that machine in action down below. I've used it for putting logs on the sawmill. I've used it for handling timbers. I've even used it for helping to stand up our first building. It's come in handy a million different ways. But I also have a hydraulic dump box on it, a material box for the back. And in this situation, this year for this shop, what we ended up doing was using the dump box to move the material away from the site immediately. So we never even put the material on the ground beside the trenches because we used a mini excavator, and the mini excavator only has a limited reach. So when you're excavating the material out of the bottom of the trench, you can only reach so far to set it down. What's 1,000 times easier is to set that material right into the dump box, and we moved it away to a stockpile. That makes all the next steps that you have to do to build the Rubble Trench foundation 1,000 times easier, and it's also a lot less mucky from the time you do it till whenever muck and dirt gets grassed up and greened up. So it's 1,000 times easier if you can manage it at all. Even if you're just dumping into a bucket of a tractor or you have to hire a piece of equipment, it is well worth it. You'll thank yourself for doing it 1,000 times between the rubble trenches and the end of your project. The next step is to line the trench with a geotextile fabric. Now, its primary job is to keep the soil from mixing with the filler material in the next step, but you can't just use any geotextile. It needs to have the correct properties. It needs to allow water to pass through the fabric while also filtering silt and sand. This is why it's often referred to as filter fabric. Okay, so here's another opportunity for you to learn from our mistakes. Big tip number 2, resist the temptation to get as little geotextile as possible to do the job. What you want is enough for each of the side walls across the bottom, and you want at least an extra foot across the top on both sides that you can use for securing the fabric in place for the next stages of the rubble trench. Now, on our first job, what we ended up doing was just barely having enough fabric. Every time we jumped into the trench or every time we dumped some gravel in there, it kept on pulling the sides down into a crumpled mass on the bottom. It was a nightmare. But with this, we had an extra foot over the top. And what I did is I took some small pieces of wood, drilled a hole in the bottom to act as a large washer. And then I used a SIP screw, or a structural insulated panel screw. Structural insulated panels are commonly used on the outside of timber frames, and you need really long screws to go all the way through the foam insulation and then into your timber frame. I repurposed some of those to use as giant clothespins to lock it into the soil so that we could work around the site and we wouldn't be constantly lifting it up and pulling it in. It was a huge help, and I recommend you do it if you can. So once the fabric is in place, we followed the common approach of adding about 4 inches of compacted gravel to the bottom of the trench, and we placed a 4-inch diameter perforated pipe in the center of the trench. We then proceeded to fill up the trench with 1 to 1 3/4 inch washed gravel. The best material is highly angular material because it compacts very well and stays compacted. And it's also important to have washed or clean material. Here is a picture of some unwashed gravel and has a lot of sediment and a lot of dust on it, and that can find its way down to your perforated pipe, and there's a risk of it clogging up. So it's important to have washed material. So you fill your trenches up with this great material and compact it about every 8 inches or so. This is a picture of a very common plate compactor you can probably get at many of the common rental places. And we found it very helpful to use the tractor to set it down into the bottom of the trench and lift it out. So before I start talking about the above ground portion of the foundation system that we used, I want to talk about a couple of the big questions I always get whenever we talk about our rubble trench foundation. The first one I get asked is why is there not a footing on your foundation? Well, there actually is a footing, there just isn't what's called a spread footing. So if you look at a conventional foundation, you've got a narrow foundation wall, and then you have this enlarged area on the bottom. That's often called a spread footing. And that's sort of acts as kind of a snowshoe. It distributes the weight of the building plus all the loads placed on it over a larger area, and that just guarantees that the whole assembly isn't going to sink into the ground. And in some areas where your subsoils are not strong or firm enough, you may need something like that, in which case a rubble trench foundation may not be suitable for you. But in our situation, in consultation with the engineer, because we're far enough north, our area was heavily glaciated during the last glaciation period, so 10,000 years ago or so. For centuries and centuries and centuries, we had over a mile of ice over top of our site, and once you get down about 3 or 4 feet, it's just about as hard as rock. So we knew the subsoil was very firm, and we knew that our trench fill material, once it was mechanically compacted, was also as hard as a rock and going to stay that way. So we knew that our foundation was just fine. And the second question I get is pretty much about the opposite of that, about the dreaded frost heave. So if you live in the northern area or worked in the northern area, you know that frost heave can break roads, it can crack foundations and the whole works. And I get asked, how does your foundation deal with the dreaded frost heave? Well, it addresses that in 3 primary ways. The first way is the trench fill material that you've put in there is very, very porous, which means if you ever do have any water under there, it immediately rockets straight down below the frost line where it's not going to freeze. In addition to that, you've graded the bottom of the footings away, which means that if there ever is any water collected down there, it immediately leaves the site and is out of harm's way. And the third way it mitigates the frost heave issue is through the nature and properties of the material that you use to fill up the trenches. Your engineer will spec what's referred to as frost-free or non-frost susceptible materials. It's a bit of an odd turn of phrase that engineers usually use because, of course, every material, you put some water in it, gets down below freezing, it is going to freeze. But really what it refers to is the type of material that will not heave even if it does freeze with a little bit of moisture in it. Not all materials will actually heave when they have a bit of moisture in them and get down below freezing. Now there are many different types of frost-free material. In our situation, we used crushed blasted rock, so it's very, very angular. Ours is in kind of the 1 to 4 inch size range. So it's very, very porous, which is great, which means the water drains away really quickly. But also that highly angular surface that the material had means that it locks in really well. So when you run the compactor over it a few times, it gets just about as hard as concrete and it stays that way. One other little tidbit of advice I will offer you, when we were looking for a good source of material, we ended up getting some limestone from a local quarry, but we had a few different options, and what we found is even within a 50-mile radius, that not all of the different companies and organizations we were talking to were using the terminology the same way. So there's stone, there's rock, there's river rock, there's blasted rock, and the whole works. So make sure that your engineer has a chance to maybe take a look at your materials. What I did is I actually went out to the different quarries and I took a look at the material and I sent some pictures to the engineer and I made sure it was exactly what he wanted. The other trick is to make sure that they're washing it very well. So in our situation, we had blasted rock out of a limestone formation. So they blasted it first in great big large chunks. Then they sent that through a crusher. So it came out great, but it also came out very, very dusty. And all that dust can find its way down into the bottom of your trenches and perhaps clog up the drainage system. And you don't want that. So what they'll often do as another step, and it costs a little bit more, is they'll actually wash this material and get all the dust off of it. And some of the organizations I found when I went and previewed them weren't very good at washing. They were economizing, I think, on the amount of water they were using. So it is important. Get out there and take a look at the material ahead of time before you commit to buying tons and tons of it. Let's take a look at how we topped off our foundation. Now at this stage, there's a number of different ways you can top off the foundation and get it ready for your building. But in my situation with around 25,000 pounds of woodworking equipment, I chose a continuous grade beam. So for us, from this point on, the forming of the grade beam to the minimum depth required by the engineer is fairly straightforward. So we started the job and then brought in a carpenter friend to help speed the job along. But I will offer a couple of tidbits you should be aware of. First, if your site is slightly sloped, the grade beam can be used to compensate for that and put the building on a level plane. It can make the formwork a little bit more tricky, but it's certainly doable. And this is what we did. And my second bit of advice is to be prepared for an impressive amount of rebar. Because the loads placed on the building are concentrated in only a few places, in other words, the bottom of the post, and they're called those point loads. These points need to be reinforced with a bunch of extra rebar. In my building, for example, even though it's not a very large building, there ended up being well over a mile of rebar. And that's hundreds of bits and pieces, all needed to be bent to specs, and it took a long time. So in the end, everything worked out really well, but as you can see from the little bit of footage that we did gather, the foundation pouring and concrete work happened in the snow. At that point, I called it and said, we're not going to try and put the frame up this year. We'll put it off until the next year. And it was a good decision because it enabled me to do a whole bunch of additional work, which you'll see in the next video when I talk about the timber framing. The timber framing portion of the shop, specifically the assembly on the ground and the process of standing it up. Plus, we want to talk about some of the issues that we ran into and how we dealt with them, because it's entirely possible that you'll end up with the same situation on some of your jobs. But we'll also talk about a few tips and tricks that I used during the layout phase, as well as answering some of the questions from viewers. And I look forward to it. In the coming videos this spring and summer, everything's going to be a lot less hectic. So I'm going to be doing a lot more shooting on site. There'll be a lot more video footage and less voiceover and all that sort of stuff. So thank you for your patience on that. And I'm looking forward to giving you a lot more footage this summer as we work through all the processes of enclosing the building. So I hope you found this interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.